Belinda Tynan, our next guest on the Energetic Leader podcast, is a big believer in the power of education and how it can transform our lives and the society that we live in. It's a belief that Belinda's had from an early age, so much so that this is something she links very closely to her own purpose and her own mission in life, and that is to learn more and also to educate others. A self-confessed learnoholic, Belinda admits that having a sense of purpose has helped her focus on long-term goals and has been a big contributor to her own success. Her approach towards leadership, best described in her own words, is to be a courageous, curious and confident leader, but also to lead with kindness. She strongly believes that we all have a part to play to contribute to the world that we want to live in, and that is by being tolerant, kind, caring and also supportive. Belinda is now joining the gig economy, having recently joined Deloitte as a principal advisor. This is daunting, she admits, after 20 plus years in various leadership roles in tertiary education in Australia. But like she said during our conversation, she is never afraid to step into the arena, and we wish her all the very best. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Belinda Tynan.
And Belinda, thank you very much for being a part of the Energetic Leader podcast.
It's my absolute pleasure to sort of reconnect both with you, Kush, and also Sunny. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
All right, thank you. So to get the conversation going with this sort of like an icebreaker question we ask all of our guests. And I know, Belinda, you've been working in the executive leadership area for a long time now, in the C-suite for a long time. But before going to that, senior leadership level, how did it all begin for you? What was the very first job you've done?
Oh, look, that's such a great question. Probably two things I'd mention. The first one is that probably my first job, like as a school kid, when you turn 16 and you're allowed to go and work, is I worked at Woolworths, and I used to pack bags. So I used to pack the groceries into those brown bags, and inevitably, a brown bag would break and groceries would go everywhere. But it's kind of interesting now, the groceries have gone from being, from brown bags to plastic bags, and now we're recycling. So I think there's a bit of a kind of revolution going on there in supermarkets. But yeah, that was probably my first sort of job outside of home. But my first real job, I have to say, is that I started my own company, and I was teaching music because I'm a musician and I play the flute and the piano. And so I started teaching flute to the neighborhood kids, and I charge a very small fee for that. But I ran this big studio of students. It was really fantastic. And I did that all the way through into university as well, and that helped support me. So that's probably my first job, really, I think.
Wow, so quite entrepreneurial as well.
I was going to say, an entrepreneur to start with.
Well, actually, my dad sort of converted like the old shed out the back into a music room for me, and I had my piano in there, and I had a nice rug, and I had my music stand, and the kids would come, and I'd teach them. It was, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I really loved teaching, and I guess that's sort of, all the different things I've done in my career have all really been around education, right from that, really early age. Feels like a long time ago though now.
So teaching music early on kind of planted the seed, and then that's how a career in education started. Is that?
I think so. It's a bit like, I think now we talk a lot about what is our purpose. And probably back then, I already knew that I wanted to be a teacher. I don't know why I wanted to do that. I don't know, as young people, whether you really know, but it was something I thought, oh yeah, I really want to be a teacher. And so I hadn't really thought about what particularly, but wrapped into that was music as well, because I was a flute player and a piano player, and wasn't quite good enough to get into the really big top orchestras, and but that didn't matter so much to me. I wasn't so worried about that, because I thought, well, I would probably always wanted to teach anyway, although I did lots of performing as well, and I had a lot of fun going through university, playing in different shows and things.
So Belinda, so starting from, I guess, working in a supermarket and then doing your sort of like entrepreneurial gig, teaching music, and then fast forward, and now you're pretty much working in the higher education sector as a very, very senior leader and one of the biggest voices in Australia when it comes to higher education sector. So how did this all unfold? As in, like, when you started your journey, right, from that very beginning, did you have a certain pathway in mind in terms of we're going to do this and then leading on to the next gig? How did it unfold? I'm just curious about that.
Kush, I think you flatter me. There are many more important voices in the Australian higher education sector than mine. Well, I guess because I sort of was teaching and I was doing all that, I was a school teacher as well. So I was in school teaching. And then I thought, oh, wouldn't it be fantastic to be able to help train teachers and help teachers become better teachers? That led me into, higher education. And my very first job was at the University of Western Australia, where I went in as a very junior lecturer, started at the very bottom, and I had a lot of fun there actually for about 3 years, training music teachers to be teachers in primary schools and secondary schools. I think in terms of the leadership journey I've had, which I think is what you're sort of speaking to, is that I've always found myself, like, it hasn't really mattered which job I've had. I've always found myself leading, in a sense, or leaning into, leading things and doing things and being creative and innovative and energetic. And quite often people have turned to me in the various roles that I've had to lead things. And I have quite willingly stepped into that space. I have climbed up that tree, like all other academics, you go from lecturer to senior lecturer to associate professor and professor. And I've worked in a lot of different universities, which has given me a lot of different experiences, again, and diverse experiences, especially that I've worked in international and locations as well. So all of that, I think, sort of mixed up together, has really sort of led me to this point, in a sense. I guess it's been a 23-year journey. I was adding it up the other day and I was a bit horrified, really. But it's been a 23-year journey in higher ed. But before that, I was in schools and doing teacher education. And so education has always been a theme that ran through there. I think as well, there's probably another bit of my story, which is, I guess I do believe that rhetoric that education's transformative, because I think it was for me. So I'm a first in family, so nobody else in my family has been to university. My parents are incredibly proud of me, as are my two brothers. And sometimes we all pinch ourselves because we can't believe that this has happened and what I'm doing and how my sort of career has gone. But it's all because of education, and I've been a bit of a learnoholic, I call it. I've collected degrees and qualifications and I love to study. Even last year through COVID, I did a unit at another university and I loved doing it. It was online. I really don't know how I squashed all of that in around everything else, but it was actually really good to understand what a student goes through. So that was kind of fun too. So yeah, I think there's been that learnoholic part of me as well, collect the qualifications and I feel that has helped me transform what I can be and what I can do and what I can contribute. So I think that's part of that passion that sort of drives my purpose as well.
So you mentioned, I like that word, by the way, learnoholic. I think I'm gonna pen that and give you the credit for it too. Is being open to, do you I guess give some of the credit for your success to the fact that you have been, what you said, like a learnoholic, like open to learning every day and having done a unit through COVID, right? You're saying, there's a lot of people don't think that way about learning. It's, for a lot of people, it's just, okay, done my degree or done my apprenticeship or whatever it is. Now I'm going to just work on my trade. But then you sort of talk about another view where you are constantly open to learning new things. Just want to talk more about, I guess, having that life and
I guess I've always been curious. Well, I'm a curious kind of person and I like to know how to do things. And so I've just got this thing that, well, if you want to know how to do something, you've got to learn how to do it. And that's been part of my journey. So if I want to be an expert in something, then I need to dig into it and understand it and play in that space and learn about it, experience it, So for me, those qualifications as I've gone through have all been part of that journey of, I did one around curriculum, how to design curriculum. I was really curious about, learning science and how curriculum is designed for learners, whether you're a primary, secondary, or a tertiary student, how you learn and how that science informs how a designed learning experience can be one where a student can learn better. So there's a lot there for me in that sort of learnoholic space where I'm just driven about wanting to know how and why, so that I can be better at what I do. Yeah, so that's been quite important for me. But I really do learn things quite sideways as well. So even in my personal life, things I'm interested in, I will go really deep into something and learn it, learn it like crazy. So I live in a cool climate and I'm building this, cool climate garden. I've had to learn all about cool climate plants, cool climate science for soil, and cool climate design factors, and what impacts, in this space. It's quite complicated, actually. So, it's a journey, whether it's in your professional life or it's in your personal life, learning. What's the other thing? I did a crazy thing through COVID in the first COVID lockdown in Melbourne. I got an Ottolenghi book called Simple, and I basically cooked every recipe from beginning to end of that book. That might explain my extra COVID kilos, but it was kind of fun to do that. But I'm not a really strong cook, so it kind of helped me learn to cook a little better. And at the moment, I'm teaching myself to make ice cream, and I've made way too much ice cream recently, but I think I've nailed it. So I'm quite pleased with myself.
Odd flavors, like any odd flavors?
Black currant, because I've got all these black currants and I didn't know what to do with them. So I thought, better learn to make ice cream. So I did. And now I make strawberry ice cream. I make chocolate ice cream. It's good fun, really. It's just fun. But, seriously, just sort of, in my life journey in terms of a career and working in higher education in particular, this last sort of 23 odd years, I think it's really important that we are curious, and if you're not curious, then I don't know really how you're going to help support students, because that's what we're there doing, and if you're researching and you're making new knowledge, you have to be curious, in those spaces, in order to be able to contribute to that.
It's an interesting one, Belinda, if you don't mind me maybe digging a bit deep on this learning style, because some of the interviews we've done, what we've sort of came across two different styles. One is just through micro learning, whenever you get the opportunity to just, digest small bits and then working towards a grander kind of scope or a goal versus going very, very deep. So when it comes to, say, building your profession or, going up the leadership ladder, what has worked well for you? Is it learning more deeply or learning more broadly?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, a career? Because I don't know if you're sort of speaking a little bit to that. I think you asked me earlier, or maybe Sunny did, is it planned? I don't think I particularly planned my career or the steps I've taken. I have maybe fallen into them a little bit. And it's only been the more recent roles where I've kind of actually targeted specifically and thought, I'd like to do X, because I can see how that role could influence and, and I'm excited about it. So I think there's probably two things there. There's probably that, learning and being curious and wanting the next challenge. So there's definitely a difference between being a pro vice chancellor learning and teaching to being a provost, for example. And so you have to learn and be curious about what those different things are. But in order to become, those little subtle career shifts that you do, you quite often have to do some pre-preparation so that you can be ready for that, to make that step. So maybe it's a combination of both, Kush.
Yep. Sounds good. And I guess a link to this is, what's the most valuable lesson you have learned during your career so far? Most valuable?
Oh, that's such an possible question. The most valuable. Oh gosh. I think, you know, being a woman has its own challenges. You know, it appears in many occupations, in higher education as well, and also coming from a first in family background, perhaps I suffer with a little bit of the imposter syndrome, and so you sort of think, oh, how could I possibly be here? So there is something in there around probably just believing in yourself and having confidence. And I talk about it's actually not 4 C's, it's 3 C's and a K, but there's this thing around having courage, you know, being curious, and then your confidence, you know, sort of meshes in with that. So I probably feel more confident because I feel quite qualified, and because I'm curious and I read about things. And then, you know, I've got a natural courage, I think. I will step forward into the space. But yeah, sometimes I do pinch myself and you know, or, you know, you have the little voice in your head goes, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. Or you get put in a position where you're made to feel like you can't do that, you know, which is, you know, quite challenging as well. So I think I've learned to sort of believe in myself. Yeah, to trust and believe in myself. And especially if you've got a great team, because I love to build teams. And so if you've got a great team around you, that makes it even easier to have that sort of confidence to trust yourself to make the right call. Although you don't always make the right call, but you try to.
You said 3 C's and a K?
Yeah. So the K is kindness. I'd like it to be 4 C's, but I can't figure out what that would be, you know. So you get that courage, curiosity, confidence, and then kindness. So I think kindness is really important, and that's been a really important hallmark for me around what I expect in the workplace, what I expect of others, and just being, you know, generous of spirit and being kind. You know, life's too short, isn't it?
Very, very important trait for a leader. And I think the language and narrative around that is only changing now. You know, there's a lot of focus on mental health at the moment and so on. Things like that weren't discussed much openly. But that last point, the K that you mentioned, I think is becoming a more highlighted trait that people look for in leaders. So, yeah.
I'd expect to, because of COVID and what has happened over the last few years, you know, there's been a new level of intimacy, in a sense, that has developed through, you know, you can see into my room here, and, you know, I can see into your room, and, you know, my husband could walk in any moment, or the kids could come in, and the dogs, and there's just this new level of intimacy, and there's a depth here, I think, that talks to our humanness. And so for me, I guess that culture of care and kindness is very, very important. Yeah.
I'll ask a question here. I guess it's a bit of a pivot. Is one thing, I guess, that is, you're in education, you've taught in schools, universities. I guess it'd be interesting to know one thing that isn't really, I guess, taught in schools or universities that we really should be just even touching on or talking about. You know, for me, it would be really teaching people, you know, what their values are, or what they align with best, and it helps them progress through school and universities better. And if you have a view on...
It's hearing you say that about the values. I mean, I'd probably say something around life purpose, and understanding what your purpose is, and having those conversations earlier on. I know as a young person, you're not necessarily sure what you want to do. Like, I kind of knew I wanted to be a teacher, and so I was one of those kids that kind of had a bit of an idea. But you meet so many young people these days who fall into, you know, higher education, tertiary education, or they're in year 11 and year 12. They've got no idea. And so how do you have a conversation around one's life's purpose? You know, and it might change, you know, it may not stay fixed. But yeah, I think that could be something. There's a really neat course at Sandford University which does basically this. Apparently it's the most popular course that they do, and they talk about your life purpose, and that helps you choose what you might be in the future. It's like an undergraduate freshman
Do you know whether it's actually offered through a platform
Programmed it. That sounded really neat.
Yeah. Do you know whether it's offered through a platform like Coursera?
Oh, look, I don't know. I could look it up.
Yeah, cool.
For you and sort of send you some time if you like. Yeah.
No worries, thank you. If you don't mind, I just want to quickly loop back to the previous conversation. I just have one question. You mentioned courage. Is courage learned?
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Is courage learned? Some personalities might feel more like, I think if you're, look, I don't know, would be a bit of a leap to say that if you're extroverted, you might have more courage. That's not necessarily true. Look, I don't know.
What was it for you?
I think that I've all, pardon?
What was it for you? I guess sounded like you always had elements of courage within you, which you were able to harness. Yeah, okay.
I think I have. I think also because my parents believed in me, so they were quite supportive of me doing, what I wanted to do, and gave me, made me go to school and go through school and stuff, even when I didn't want to go to school. And I wasn't a great attender, actually. It's amazing I got through. So I think, maybe part of my personality is that I do have courage. I'm not afraid to step out the front, and, I'm not afraid to be in the arena. And I think that's been part of that leadership journey, and why people have often, pointed me out, or I've come out of the pack. If you want somebody to lead something or do something, I feel quite happy, jumping out front and having a go. So maybe I do have elements of that. Sorry, Sonny?
You feel comfortable being uncomfortable, like you said, being out in the arena and spotlight, I guess, as in terms of pressure and like a challenge thrown at you, and just say, okay.
I think so. I probably do now. Probably more. Over the years, I've become more comfortable with that. Yeah. And I'm okay with it. You can pivot, and that you can manage, high risk situations and the challenges that are put in front of you. So, I feel more comfortable with it as I've got more experience, as I've understood. Because you can't just take risks and have courage and be silly about it. These are, we use that term, what is it, the calculated risk, to have courage to do things. But there are times when you do sort of step out and you go right out front and you say, well, I believe that we can do this. I believe in you, that you can do this, so we can do it, and that's probably, I've become more confident with being able to do that.
Bit of time travel type questions now, Belinda.
Oh, no, really?
So I guess knowing what you know now and where you are at now, if you were to give some advice to your 25-year-old self, younger self, what would they be?
I know this question, it's sort of a question I often ask other people. I think there's something in there as you sort of mature and you grow up, in a sense, and you learn things, is that, when you're 25, you kind of think you know everything, and you know the world. And I meet lots of 25-year-olds in my job, and I'm just so impressed with, their courage and their confidence and everything they're doing. But sometimes they get derailed by their emotions. And when I think back to when I was 25, I was probably less aware of how emotions impact your work and impact others as well. So I'd probably say to my 25-year-old self is like just listen a little more, take a few deep breaths before you launch into something, and just sort of be aware of what you're feeling in the moment and how that might impact others. Because I think over time you mature that skill, or you get better at that skill. Yeah, so that's probably what I'd say. Take a few deep breaths before you leap into something.
Fantastic.
No, I was just going to say, I do wonder how much of that has to do with, sometimes you mentioned having to go through that journey and having to go through the motions. You just have to do it. It's just something, it's a common question that we ask people on the podcast, and, people do have similar responses to what you said. I just wonder, though, if you are 25, do you just have to go through the motions, like the ups and downs, and just to to learn
Gosh,
through
you
it?
would. Gosh, you probably do. And I mean, you wouldn't want to take any of that energy out because, working with 25, 30, 35-year-olds, there's so much energy sitting in there and so many ideas and different ways of thinking. And so for me, I find it that, that intergenerational play that happens, I just love that. But yeah, I think sometimes you've got to just let it play out. Like there are sometimes with, when you're in a group and a team and you sort of think, oh, I'm not sure that's going to work. But anyway, I think that we will run with this, and you work as a team, and you never know, it just might happen, and quite often it does. And so, I think you have to just learn some of that over time. Yeah. And let's face it, 25, depending where they are in their career, the world's not going to end if you make a mistake. I mean, I remember when I was younger, like, at that age, when you do make a mistake and you fail at something, being able to pick yourself back up and keep going forward, you sort of felt like the world was going to end and crumble around you. But actually it doesn't. And you just learn and you keep going. So, I think it's part of just growing. It's part of being human. And if we were kind to each other and had that culture of care, then that would be perfectly fine.
I think that's where I guess having great leadership around you would make or break your career, isn't it? When you fall down like that, if you are under a great leader, you would get guidance to move forward rather than crumble down. Maybe another time-related question. Just imagine it's 2030. Where's Belinda Tynan? What's Belinda Tynan doing?
Oh, what is Belinda Tynan doing in 2030? Wow. Now let me just check my maths. That's another 8 years away. I'm probably still learning. I could be in another leadership position, a different one to the one I'm in, or I might not be. I might decide to do something completely different. Look, I don't know where I'll be. I don't think you can kind of predict the future. I know it'll be definitely something around education. I know it'll be about that. I might do some more volunteering work. I do some work at the moment with the Commonwealth of Learning, and I'd really like to have more time to be more engaged in doing that kind of work. So working, with perhaps making sure they have access to education. It was hard when I think COVID, millions of young girls, have lost out on an education over the past 2 years and what that will do for them. So yeah, probably I will move more towards that kind of work potentially, but who knows? I don't know. I haven't got a plan.
That's great. That's a great answer. Like we can't be so prescriptive, right? With that.
No. Some people do. Some people know exactly what they're going to do next. But I haven't. I don't have that at the moment. No. I feel quite happy doing what I'm currently doing, and I'm really enjoying life actually, and the moments that we're currently in, and definitely post-COVID, a much deeper appreciation for our fellow people, fellow humans, and what that means, in terms of what our society might look like moving forward.
Can I just say that's a really uplifting thing to say in this time, like just because people need to be taking stock, stopping, just pausing for a minute, because it is just so much negativity, which is not hard to find, but I think people need to be.
I love that word pause, like take a pause, take a nice deep breath and go, okay, what am I doing here? You can get on that treadmill running, and what for? And that goes back to that purpose. And you're asking yourself the big questions, the meaning of my life, and how you sit with that. And I always talk about, the world we want to live in, and so everyone can play a part in that. All of us can give a contribution to the world we all want to live in, that is tolerant and, and is kind and is caring, supportive, to so that we can have a great society, you know. But we've seen some really ugly things over the last few years, and that, you know, and I'm, you know, I get worried about, you see the figures around domestic violence, and, you know, it's I find it traumatizing to think that there are women and families out there who are dying every week. You know, it's unacceptable in our society, you know. But that's only one issue, you know.
Correct. And it's kind of as where we've come as a society, and to think that there is a sort of a vulnerable cohort of people, you know, in a first world country, it is kind of makes you think twice. You're absolutely right.
You know, and the homelessness. So in Melbourne, you know, I think about 70% of the homelessness people on the street, they're under the age of 17. Wow. You know, anyone should find that shocking. So what are we doing about it? You know, yeah, I think there are some big things that we could all be leaning into. Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit sad. It's a bit of a downer, isn't it?
No, well, look, you know, as a leader, you're thinking about this, and this is very important. You know, just because we work in, you know, corporate space or something doesn't mean that society's problems are not our problems. They are, and then we need to be giving it time, giving it thought, and using our resources and our intellect to solve these problems. So, no, absolutely.
Which is why I think education, and have believed that education is transformative, you know, for low SES kids, our Indigenous kids, numerous people who have multiple factors riding against them, you know, getting them that opportunity to get into university or TAFE or whatever they want to do, and supporting them, helping them realise and lift themselves up and out, build confidence, you know, and resilience, you know. I really believe in that, and I believe that's what education can do. So I think I'll stick at
it. Shifting gears a bit, Belinda, just want to explore a bit around this self-development type stuff you do. So if we can ask, what books, lessons, people or situations that have shaped you during your career, maybe if you can share some learnings there, that'd be awesome.
I think having good mentors or coaches around you is really important, and so I've had a few of those sorts of people in my life, which has been great, where I've been afforded opportunities to flourish, and that's been really excellent. I do a lot of reading, and I did pull out some books. So I mean, no one would be surprised that, you know, I quite like Brené Brown, and so Dare to Lead was given to me actually by a girlfriend a few years ago. I'd never really read Brené's stuff before. This really spoke to me. I loved it. You know, The Infinite Game. You know, Simon Sinek, yeah. And you can see that, like, I have bookmarked it. This is kind of how crazy I am about my learning. I've bookmarked it, underlined it, all the pages, and just occasionally I'll open it up and I'll go, what did I bookmark on there? What did I think was important? And look, listen to this one. So this is on page 75. I've underlined, companies exist to advance something. Technology, quality of life, or anything else with the potential to ease or enhance our lives in some way, shape, or form. That just speaks to me, like, you know, just given what we were just speaking about. So I quite like Simon Sinek. I really enjoyed, this is kind of a weird book, which is
Teams of Teams. All right.
Team of Teams. Well, it's not weird, but it might be a bit unusual. Yeah, by General Stanley McChrystal. And it's all about teams and how teams work together. And I really like this book, and I think that there's some really interesting things too.
Was that, I'm going to take a guess here. Was that a Martin Bean recommendation? Because 5 years ago, when I was at RMIT, I got given that book by Kate, and she was given the book by Martin. So I read that book.
So again, I've underlined something here, and it sort of talks about it's important to have transparent information sharing and decentralized decision-making authority, which is true. People need to know that they can make decisions, but they need all the information in order to do it, and you've got to trust them and allow them to do that. Fantastic. It's great. And this is kind of one I've been sort of just reading for a bit of fun recently, which is this one by Matt Ridley, and it's called How Innovates. And it sort of takes you through a whole range of different things that have been innovated, I guess, around public health, transport, energy, the economics of innovation. It's been quite fun, really. I've quite enjoyed it. There's been stuff about the Dyson vacuum cleaner in here, and other bits and pieces around, about how we got wheels on baggage when that happened and why it happened and how that revolutionized travel. It's quite amazing. So that's kind of interesting as well. But I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly picking up books to read. I read a lot of fiction as well. And that's important to me too. I love a story. I love stories. And so I read a lot of fiction along with sort of business books, and obviously because I'm in that academic field, I'm quite often reading academic papers as well. And, the typical things, you're going to conferences and stuff, although not for the last few years. So I've done a few virtual conferences. And just this week, actually, I went to something presented by Holon Q, which was looking at, attitudes to digitization in higher education and what's happening around the world. That was really interesting. So I'm constantly, picking up bits here and there, from people, from others.
Just curious, Belinda, when you start reading a book, do you read end to end, or you pretty much pick certain bits and bobs you know are going to be appealing to you? What's your reading style?
It's mixed. I used to be one of those people that, I bought this book, I'm going to read it from the beginning to the end, regardless if I think it's awful and I can't bear it. Fiction books I do tend to read from beginning to end because I don't mind the challenge, and I think it's quite good to be challenged sometimes, although there have been the odd book where I thought, I'm not going to read this one, I'll read something else. In these sorts of books, like I will dip in and out of them. The Brené Brown one just captured me, and I read that from beginning to end. That was fantastic. Team of Teams, again, I read from beginning to end. And I did actually on Infinite Game too. So I don't know. I think it probably varies. I am reading this other little book here, which I didn't mention, which is called Recipe for a Kinder Life, which is by a chef called Annie Smithers. And I've just been dipping in and out of that one. That's really kind of interesting. So I think it's probably mixed. There's no set rule.
Cool. And maybe if we can also ask, now, the more senior you go, the challenges are going to be different, and you're going to be in high pressure situations more and more. And it's ever more important to be in very good high energy states, enthusiastic attitude, all that stuff, because at the end of the day, as a leader, we are leading others and, taking others on a bit of a journey. What are some of your go-to tips and tricks and tactics to keep in high energy states? That's good, positive attitude.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess I'm probably more of a cup half full kind of person anyway. But I have my dog days like everybody else does, But I guess, eating well, I drink lots of water. I don't drink very much, and I don't have caffeine. I'm probably really boring on that front. I think having time, like having other things, really important. So making sure that you've got some other interests that are not just work-based. Putting boundaries. I think I've learned over time, putting boundaries around work. And some weekends I have to work. Sometimes you have to sprint, and it's crazy, and everybody knows that. But then you can have a break. So there's sort of things like that as well. But yeah, I think exercise is really important in that mix too. And just sort of, I guess, remembering to stop and just breathe and look around you, so meditation's important to me, so I meditate every day as well. And I picked that up mainly because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't stay still. I couldn't get my mind to stay still. And I just thought everything was running way too fast. And that wasn't helpful because that starts to influence a team, and other people start to, it all becomes too frantic. So developing a much better control and a sense of calm is actually quite important too. So I think those things all combined. And then also fun. Got to have fun. I like fun. So that's very important to me at work, is that you have a good time as well. You're not just going there to, be a slave in a sense. You're going to have, you spend a lot of time there, so you've got to have some fun as well.
Exactly.
What impact has meditation, do you think, had on, I guess, in your life? Is that it's hard to stop the noise. I'm just, it's a challenge for me as well. I sometimes try to go for a walk at lunchtime, and I don't take my phone, or I do take my phone, but I don't, scroll through it. But sometimes when I run, I see people with their headphones on because they want to, listen to an audiobook or something. I try not to, but sometimes I do that because I want to be on my own. So what's your take on? It's very challenging, is my take on it.
I think it's really hard to. I think meditation's quite hard. It's hard to be still and to be present. I think it's something that you practice and you keep practicing. I think the way it has affected the way I work is that I'm more conscious of the things that are going on around me. And I've learnt things like, take a few deep breaths, and controlling your breathing, especially in challenging, difficult, or even confrontational moments. And so that has been very helpful for that, especially if it's a very challenging, fiery kind of moment for whatever reason, to be able to have the self-awareness, to take a few deep breaths, to be in control, focus. I think that has really helped me as well. And it sort of stops that, how you have the fight or the flight brain, the reaction that you have. And so rather than going to those extremes that you're either fighting or you're flying off somewhere, you can actually just take a few breaths, and it might seem interminable, but actually it turns out it's not interminable. And your few second breaths can actually center you. So I don't know. I think it's a practice. It's a practice, and you just keep practicing. But I do, where I live at the moment, there's this beautiful 5-kilometer walk. Sometimes I listen to something, but most often I don't, because what I want to do is be really observant, and I want to hear, I want to listen, and I want to smell, I want to see, and I want to be in this moment for this period of time. So it's very meditative, just doing that walk, until a ute comes along and sprays me with dust,
But again, if you're centered, you won't be bothered by that.
I usually stand towards the side of the road and cover my mouth and face, and then when they're gone, you start up again. But sometimes it can be so quiet and so still that you can hear the wind in the trees, and other things become apparent. And I think that's really special. Probably sounds a bit weird, but it feels really good.
I totally agree.
It's very energizing.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Cool. And maybe just before we move on to the last section, just one quick one for you, Belinda. Is there any facet in your life or a skill that you're trying to sharpen a bit more, enhance a bit more?
Oh, look, I'm always trying to sharpen how to listen better. I'm always trying to sharpen that. Like, actually, it's probably not listening, it's understanding. So when somebody says something, it's understanding what they mean, sharpening that skill and getting that more precise more quickly. So, yeah,
I think
that's probably one thing.
I think that's a fantastic way to reframe that, isn't it? It's not listening, it's the outcome is understanding.
Yeah. So I kind of like, listen to someone, but I understand what they mean, So that's about asking lots and lots of questions and making sure that you do that, asking and not making that leap. I think as you can, I think as a leader, sometimes make the leap about what you think someone's saying, and you interpret it without actually fully having understood it. So I think I'm constantly practicing that. Yeah.
So I think we were pretty much at the last segment of our podcast, which is a bit of a rapid fire type question. The first thing that comes to your mind, Belinda. So maybe we'll tag team here, Sunny and I'll fire off the first question. When things get really challenging, I
like to eat cake.
By far the best answer we've had so far.
I love cake. It's like, eat anything sweet. When things get really challenging, give me some chocolate. Give it to me. No, actually, when things get really challenging, I like to find a friend and talk to them about it and just talk it through. and being able to be sort of vulnerable with someone in a period, in a private moment, sort of really challenging, talk it through, digest it, rumble with it, as Brené Brown would say. That's what I do when things get really challenging.
I like that. So this is not a fill in the blanks, but just the first thing that comes to your mind when you think, I can't believe I did that, and I can't believe I got away with it. I mean that in a positive sense. I mean that in a positive sense, that you surprise yourself with your own capability and you look back at it for ammunition, like, okay, I did that, I can do this next thing too.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever really thought about it like that. Sunny? No. No, I've never really thought about it like that, although I guess the current role I'm in, I'm doing something that I'd learned in the previous two roles. And so I felt quite comfortable making a decision that would require quite, multi-million-dollar investment. And I felt quite confident to deliver it, So I don't know, is that the same sort of thing? So yeah, maybe. I guess there's an audaciousness in it that I felt quite confident, like, we can do that. Like, people, don't worry. You say you haven't got the capability, we're going to build the capability as we go. It'll be really exciting, but it's going to cost us, and we've got to believe that we can do it. And, I was quite happy to be right out front and to lead that. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's great.
So next question. When I must make a choice that I know will lead to short-term pain, but long-term gain, I construct my thinking by...
Wow. Okay. Big question. Good question. And a lot of us in executive leadership roles find ourselves in those positions, and there's constant change. It doesn't matter whether you're in universities or where you are, it's constant change. I'd say I probably lean towards the people side of change processes, and that's really important to me, and probably supports a lot of the things that I've said before. I have a particular case where not that long ago we had to do a big change. We were digitizing an area of the university where there were some low-level manual type roles. And those people were very vulnerable, mainly male men in their mid to late 50s, probably got another 5 to 10 years worth of working life, but they've been at this organisation for a long period of time. And then I'm coming in and we're saying, hey, we're going to change everything. And unfortunately, that means your roles are changing. What can we do? They're very vulnerable. So I think for me, it's really important to understand the impacts of different change processes that you might have. And I probably go to that impact quite quickly, actually. It's important to me that those people are treated with respect. They're given opportunities, they're given options, and we think carefully about the damage that we might be doing to who they are as individuals. Yeah, especially in that sort of scenario where you've got people that need to be retrained, and whether or not they want to be engaged in that kind of environment or not, and how you manage that sort of carefully.
Yeah. And I think
to get where you need to be,
yeah.
But certainly lots of pain in that.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important distinction to make, isn't it? Leadership, a big part of that is actually people, and having a people first agenda is such an important facet of leadership. So thank you, Doctor.
I was going to ask the last question, Belinda, but I think you sort of touched on it in your answer just in the previous one, that when I don't have all the facts to make an informed decision, what I do is, and I'm going to guess...
I huddle. I huddle with others. Sometimes I'll ask an outside expert. I'll huddle with people. I'll do some research, do some learning. And hopefully, we don't, it might be my call because I'm the leader, but because I have had lots of input from other people, I'm making more of an informed call. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's fabulous. So Belinda, I think that's pretty much we are reaching the end of our podcast questionnaire, and I think we can keep talking about many, many different things. It's very diverse, very interesting conversation. But firstly, wanted to really thank you for being so generous with your time and taking the time to connect with Sunny and I on this Energetic Leader podcast. There's a bucket load of golden nuggets, wisdom nuggets in this, and our audience will greatly, greatly benefit from that. So thank you very much.
No. Well, thank you as well. It's you always feel a little bit like you've been put on the spot, and you hope that the experience that you've had is probably not dissimilar to many others' experience, and that it might ring true in places for them too. But thank you both to you and Sunny as well. I've really appreciated the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Belinda.
Belinda.